Flat Stanley Worldwide Adventures, The Great Egyptian Grave Robbery. Chapter 4. The bazaar was colorful with overflowing displays and noisy with the cheerful shouts of buyers and sellers. Booths were piled with antiques, woven rugs and embroidered cloths, ancient pottery and plates, brass lamps, gold jewelry, silver brushes and combs, decorated tables and scrolls. Everywhere, Stanley smelled incense and perfume and spices. Donkeys brayed, the carts jostled the crowds. Now and then, Stanley had to turn sideways to get through without bumping into anything. Sometimes, he reminded himself, sometimes being flat makes me feel lucky. But mostly, he reminded himself, mostly being flat just makes me feel flat. He couldn't help wondering which way he would feel at the end of his adventure. If he ever had an adventure, how would he know he was at the right place? How would he find Sir Abu Shanti Hawara IV? Psst! Flatly, you Flatly pork shop. Before Stanley could correct whomever was there, an arm shot out and dragged him behind a hanging rug. "Come with me," said the man in a dark uniform. "Sir's been waiting for you." The man pulled Stanley through the back alleys of the bazaar until they came to a fenced-off tent surrounded by more uniformed men. Inside, even more guards nodded at Stanley. Man and stepped inside. Inside the tent was dark, with clouds of smoke rising from oil lamps and pots of incense. After a moment, Stanley made out a bearded man in a red robe, seated on a gold-embroidered cushion. Sir Abu Shanti Hawara V clapped his hands and motioned for Stanley to approach. And then he nodded to a guard. "Turn him sideways," he ordered, pointing. Very rudely, Stanley thought to Stanley. "Measure him." Stanley knew it was important to be polite, even when faced with rudeness. "I'm Stanley Lanchop from America," he introduced himself. "I'm very pleased to meet you. I hope you're not likely to pop out around in the middle of things, are you?" Sir Harara interrupted. "This flatness isn't just a party trick, right?" Stanley sighed. "Not so far." The guard had finished the measuring. 1/2 inches thick, he reported. "Good then," Sir Harara said. "Let's get started. I've been waiting a long time for this." He clapped his hands again, and 6 guards sprang to his side. Several of them spread maps and photographs on the ground, while other lit his pipe. "You smoke, Lanchop?" Sir Harara asked. Stanley shook his head no, wondering what his parents might say about this. "Too flat, I suppose," Sir Harara amused. He shook his head and then tapped his pipe on the map in front of him. "This here is the Great Pyramid of Khufu, sealed for more than 4,000 years. It is believed at the center, inside the pharaoh's tomb, the priceless giant scrolls, papyrus." Stanley waved away some smoke. "And you're going to go in and find them?" "Wrong," answered Sir Harara. "You're going to go in and find them. That's why I've brought you here." "But I don't know anything about," Stanley begun. Sir Harara ignored him. According to ancient lore, King Fufulful locked his tomb from the inside to protect it from grave robbers. At the words grave robbers, Stanley shivered and broke into goose discs. Since his encounter with the bulletin board, Stanley's goosebumps now came up as flat as the rest of him. More likely, tiny discs than bumps. Nothing to be alarmed about, Dr. Dan had assured his parents when they noticed this. Perfectly normal in these cases. I've been expecting it. Also, Sir Harara continued, he had dozens of tricks, passageways built, leading nowhere. However, he did leave one way out, a passageway 3 inches wide, just wide enough for his soul to escape. He pointed his pipe at Stanley. That's where you come in. I've found the entrance to that passageway. You're going to enter the tomb, find out if the scrolls are really there, and then unlock the tomb from the inside. Got it? Stanley nodded. Good. Sir Harara rose from his cushion and clapped his hands one more time. Saddle up a camel for our flat friend, he ordered the guard. Then he turned to Stanley. 1 hump or 2? Stanley stared at him. That's a joke, Lamb Chop, Harara said. We only have 1-humped camels here in Egypt. Okay, friends, what do you think is going to happen when Stanley goes into the tomb?